Welcome. Stalled talks between the United States and North Korea are back on track, and that's our breaking news. The announcement was made earlier by U.S. President Donald Trump after meeting a top Korean envoy at the White House. Pyongyang had dispatched General Yong Chol to deliver a letter to President Trump. Now, President Trump had cancelled the June 12th summit, but both sides agreed to move forward. Scheduled to happen in Singapore, the historic meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un would be the first between sitting U.S. and North Korean leaders. The visit to the White House on Friday was the first since 2000, when President Bill Clinton met senior figure Jo Myong Rok in an unsuccessful attempt to win the North Korea's nuclear disarmament. Kim Jong-chol is the vice chairman of North Korea's ruling party executive. In remarks to reporters, Trump said he believed North Korea wanted to de-nuclearise, but repeatedly said a compromise would likely require multiple meetings. He said they discussed lifting sanctions in exchange for North Korea giving up the nuclear program.
Years of really hatred between so many different nations, but I think you're going to have a very positive result in the end. Not from one meeting, but you're going to have a
You appear to question their sincerity in your letter to Kim Jong-un last week. Have they gone far enough now?
Well, don't forget, my letter was a response to their letter. The media forgot that. You know, the media said, oh, you had a meeting, then you canceled. I didn't cancel the meeting. I canceled it in response to a very tough statement.
Now, our correspondent Nick Harper is in New York, and he joins us live to give us details on this all-important visit around the talks. Nick, one day the meeting is on, the other there are doubts that's going to happen, but boom, earlier President Trump says it's green light.
That's right, Paul. It's been a very strange week. In the middle of last week, President Trump very surprisingly went ahead and cancelled the meeting, writing that letter to Kim Jong-un that he referred to, as we heard just a moment ago, saying that because of the aggressive rhetoric coming out of North Korea, he couldn't go ahead with the planned summit. Since then, there's been a flurry of meetings around the world. In Singapore itself, in the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea, here in New York over the last few days, in Washington, D.C. and Beijing, both sides, the North Koreans and the Americans, really trying to salvage the summit, get it back on track after it had been cancelled by President Trump. And yes, here we are in this strange situation of the on-again, off-again summit. It is now back on again, and President Trump has confirmed that it's really business as usual. It will take place in Singapore, and it will take place on the original planned date of June the 12th. There's just been this very odd period, a hiatus of 7-8 days or so, where all these meetings, these backroom deals have been going on to try and cement enough goodwill from both sides that they are happy to sit down in that conference room in Singapore in just under 2 weeks' time.
Now, the letter that the envoy brought in, do we know what's contained in that?
Well, President Trump hinted at that letter, saying, wouldn't you like to see it? But he didn't show it. He was speaking to reporters straight after the meeting, and it is believed that there was that letter, that it was hand-delivered by Kim Yong Chol while they were in the Oval Office for nearly 2 hours. But President Trump at this stage not saying what was in it. There were media reports earlier on in the day in the United States, coming from the Wall Street Journal, that this letter was a very brief, very basic letter, that it didn't contain any threats, but at the same time it didn't contain any concessions. It just simply stated that Kim Jong-un wanted to meet President Trump. We're not clear at this stage if that was actually the case, but whatever. The letter, the almost 2-hour meeting, those things perhaps combined on top of the week of meetings that we've seen right around the world is obviously enough to have convinced the US President Donald Trump that he is happy and he's willing to go ahead with the meeting that he himself cancelled just over a week ago.
But there seemed to be more communication or more information coming out of the U.S. in as far as this meeting is concerned. We're not hearing so much from North Korea. Even, I mean, it was President Trump who said he's considering cancelling this meeting. North Korea seems to be very quiet on this matter. What are we supposed to read into this? Are they as committed?
It is a strange one, Mpo. You're right, that they are much more tight-lipped than the Americans in terms of giving details, giving updates. We had the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, here in New York for 2 days, on Wednesday and Thursday. He held a very public press conference, but Kim Yong Chol, who he was meeting with, didn't give a press conference, didn't give any details. I guess the only indication that we've had in the last couple of days, and I have to mention that there's been no direct response from the North Koreans in the last hour or so since President Trump said the meeting was back on. The main bit of communication we've had in the last few days has been from the North Korean leader himself. Kim Jong-un was meeting with the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, in North Korea, in Pyongyang. And during that meeting, he said that he was committed to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That firm resolve was still there, according to the media who reported on that. But you're right, there isn't really as much communication. There isn't much of a two-way dialogue when it comes to the North Koreans and saying what they think. The assumption is that they'll be happy the summit is back on, but of course that hasn't been confirmed. It hasn't been said from them themselves.
Now, this denuclearization process, it is the U.S. that has said, well, President Trump actually earlier on just said, you know, he believes that they are committed to it. Have they hinted anything to that effect, that indeed they are committed to this denuclearization process?
I have to admit, the waters are somewhat muddied when it comes to the denuclearization. Kim Jong-un saying that he is ready and able to denuclearize the peninsula. We saw the destruction of one of their production facilities about a week ago. They let the media in to see all of that. The United States has always been very firm in its position that it wants the complete denuclearization. They're calling it the complete and verifiable denuclearization, and that has to include, they say, not just the nuclear weapons program, but the missile program as well. And at this stage, the North Koreans haven't explicitly said that they're happy for the denuclearization label to cover both things, the missiles and the nuclear weapons as well. And worryingly, within the last week, there has been a report from the CIA here in the United States suggesting that North Korea, even though they're saying that they're ready to go ahead with the denuclearization, actually probably won't. They will try and hang on to some of their nukes. So that's, I guess, why the US is saying they need verifiable evidence that North Korea has got rid of their nuclear weapons, all of their nuclear material, and do not plan to try and restart their program.
And I mean, if you look at diplomatic initiatives of this sort in the past, we would know that, I mean, this one in Singapore, it's basically going to be, you know, a handshake, photo opportunity type of a session. And perhaps, yes, there will be those behind the scenes talks. But this is basically to break the ice. There's so much that is yet to be accomplished. Is that the feeling?
Well, I think so, and I think that's what President Trump is hinting at. This will be the historic moment. As you mentioned, the photo opportunity, the fact that we've never had a sitting US president meeting with a leader of North Korea, and here we will have them shaking hands in the same room with each other and having discussions. But President Trump has said that this will be a process, that they're not going to achieve everything that they want to achieve in a single meeting. He said that there potentially could be more meetings coming out of that. At this stage, there hasn't been any sort of timetable suggested beyond this first summit. I guess up until about an hour ago, because it wasn't clear if the summit was back on, that was the main focus. It may now be that behind the scenes, in the back channels, there are diplomats working on some other dates where there could be some other meetings, not between necessarily the leaders of the two countries, but some of the other high-ranking officials. Potentially the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. He's being referred by the US administration as being the president's point person when it comes to North Korea. So yes, I think a single meeting would be a lot to hope that they would achieve everything. They would achieve the complete denuclearization. We may get some promises, we may get some pledges, we'll certainly get a handshake and a historic moment, but there is probably more work to be done beyond that single summit.
Now, Does President Trump take the entire credit for this meeting to happen, or do we know if, for instance, sports diplomacy played a role? We know that Kim Jong-un is friends with the U.S. Basketball superstar Rodman there, but we don't know if he has had any type of role to play in this. But I'm just asking myself, did he by himself really, as one-man Trump, pull this one off?
Well, look, let's put it this way. If things do get pulled off, President Trump will undoubtedly take the credit. He is the man that's all about the art of the deal, the businessman, looking for the deal, getting the handshake, getting the promise. So if it all comes together, yes, he will be front and centre in the limelight. There have been talks, rumours, potential speculation that if it were to take place, there could even be a Nobel Peace Prize in the works for him. But you do have to remember all of the backroom meetings, all of the diplomatic channels that have been kept open. And of course, Mike Pompeo, who only recently has stepped into this Secretary of State role, has met with Kim Jong-un, North Korea's leader, twice within the last month, and has certainly moved this whole conversation forward. So there have been other meetings that the president hasn't been involved with, that perhaps has laid the groundwork. But President Trump will want to be able to say that he takes all the credit for this. But yes, you're right, there also has been that basketball diplomacy in the intervening years, where we've seen basketball stars travel to North Korea because Kim Jong-un loves basketball. And that, I guess, has softened the image of the United States for the North Koreans. It perhaps has started some sort of dialogue. But President Trump, of course, is now saying that he's the one that's going to finally do the deal.
Now, the North Korea is linked to South Korea in, by all accounts. Now, this meeting is happening at a time when relations between the North and the South are also softening up. Have they welcomed this developments, the reassurance that the meeting is going on? Do they have any role to play, given the fact that they are very close to the U.S., naturally?
That's right. Well, last time round, when the summit was on, we knew that the South Koreans were happy that it was taking place. We've even heard reports in the last week that the president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, is suggesting a three-way summit, that after the 12th of June summit takes place, he wants to have a summit with President Trump, with Kim Jong-un, all three of them sitting down together to discuss other matters. And we have seen in the last 24 hours quite a historic agreement between the North and the South. They have agreed at a later date, on June the 14th, to have a conversation about potential joint military exercises, some sort of shared incentive. They've also said that they will discuss on another date the possibility of reuniting some families who were separated as a result of the Korean War that started back in 1950. And they're also going to talk about potentially putting together a joint North and South Korea sports team, a lot like what we saw at the Winter Olympics back in February. So yes, South Korea is very much determined to try and move things forward, and also to help itself in the conversations that it wants to have. President Trump, when he spoke to reporters just over an hour ago, did say that he had spoken to Kim Yong Chol, the North Korean official, about potentially ending the war between North and South Korea. This is a big one, because back in 1953, when the Korean War ended, there was simply a truce, an armistice. There wasn't a permanent peace deal agreed, and it is something that Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president, definitely wants to try and get onto the negotiating table, to try and push forward if he can. So there are things in the works. The South Koreans are very much hoping that the summit will be a success, and they'll be able to negotiate some of their own terms as well.
Nick, I need to put you on the spot here. Do you think President Trump will bring some chocolate for Kim Jong-un? He loves them.
Potentially, yes. You never know. Donald Trump always joked about the fact that he wanted to sit down and have a burger with Kim Jong-un, potentially somewhere in the United States, travelling all the way to Singapore. I don't know if he's going to take an American burger or something else from the United States. Gift giving is an important thing in that part of the world. So yes, he'll have to take something. It'll be interesting to see what his choice is, and of course, what gift he gets in return.
Nick Harper, thank you very much. Now, going on with our news, the United